The December wind howled through Snow Ridge like a wounded animal, driving needles of ice against weathered storefronts and rattling loose shutters. The Wyoming Territory in 1884 was no place for the weak, and winter had a way of sorting the living from the dead with ruthless efficiency. Snow piled in drifts against buildings, turning the main street into a narrow canyon of dirty white walls. Eliza Monroe pulled her threadbare shawl tighter, though it did little against the cold that seemed to seep through her very bones. Her boots, worn through at the toes, let in slush with every step. She paused outside the boarding house where she'd spent the last of her money 3 days ago, watching Mrs. Hartley nail a new sign to the door, "No fallen women." The words might as well have been branded on Eliza's forehead. It had been 2 months since she'd fled Kansas. 2 months since the lies began spreading like wildfire. But gossip traveled faster than any horse, and her reputation had beaten her to every town she'd tried to settle in. "Move along, Miss Monroe." "Mrs." Hartley called from the doorway, her voice sharp as the wind. "I run a respectable establishment. Can't have your kind bringing trouble to my door." Eliza's pride flared briefly, a small flame against the cold. "I've brought no trouble, ma'am. I've kept to myself and paid my rent. Until 3 days ago." The older woman's eyes were hard as flint. "And now folks are talking. That gentleman from Kansas was asking about you yesterday. Said things about what you done back there." She shook her head. "I got other boarders to think about. Christian folk." The flame of pride guttered and died. Eliza had 15 cents to her name, no food since yesterday morning, and nowhere to go. She turned away without another word, her feet carrying her toward the saloon district where the non-Christian folk conducted their business. The Lucky Dollar Saloon spilled yellow light and rough laughter into the street. Eliza hesitated at the edge of that light, knowing what stepping into it might mean. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and the cold had numbed her fingers until she could barely feel them. She'd traded away everything of value except her mother's ring, and that she'd starve before surrendering. Well, what have we here?" The voice came from the shadows beside the saloon. Jake Morrison emerged, whiskey heavy on his breath, his bulk blocking her retreat. She'd served him coffee at the boarding house, endured his leering looks and wandering hands. Mrs. Hartley finally tossed you out." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Cold night for a lady to be walking alone." "I'm fine. Mr. Morrison." Eliza tried to step around him, but he moved with her. A predator's dance. "Now don't be unfriendly." His hand caught her arm, fingers digging through the thin fabric. "I got a room upstairs. Warm bed, hot meal. All you gotta do is be nice to old Jake." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Eliza jerked against his grip, but hunger had made her weak. "Let go of me." "Come now, we both know what kind of woman you are. What they're saying about you and that banker back in Kansas." His other hand reached for her face. Might as well make some good of it. "I said no." She twisted harder, panic rising in her throat. "Ladies who can afford to say no don't stand outside saloons at night." His grip tightened, pulling her toward the alley. The click of a hammer being cocked cut through the night like a blade. The lady said no. Both Eliza and Morrison turned. A man stood 10 feet away. His Colt .45 held loose at his side, not quite pointing at anyone but ready to. He wore a long duster over work clothes, his hat pulled low against the wind. In the weak light from the saloon, Eliza could make out a strong jaw roughened by stubble, eyes the color of winter sky. "This ain't your concern, Briggs," Morrison growled, but his grip on Eliza loosened. "Made it my concern when you didn't listen to her." The man called Briggs stepped closer, spurs ringing against frozen ground. "Let her go. Jake, find your entertainment with someone willing." Morrison's face flushed red even in the cold. "She's just another—" "Choose your next words, careful-like." Briggs' voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd faced down worse than a drunk bully. "Real careful." For a moment, the three of them stood frozen in tableau. Then Morrison released Eliza's arm with a muttered curse. Ain't worth the trouble anyway. He stumbled back toward the saloon, shooting one last poisonous look at them both. Eliza rubbed her arm where bruises would bloom by morning. The stranger holstered his gun and shrugged out of his duster in one smooth motion. "Here." He held out the coat. "You're shaking." Pride warred with necessity. Necessity won. The coat was still warm from his body, smelling of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably male. It fell nearly to her ankles. "Thank you," she managed through chattering teeth. He studied her for a moment, those sky-blue eyes taking in her worn dress, her hollow cheeks, the desperate dignity she wore like armor. "You got somewhere to go?" The question she'd been dreading. "I'll manage." "That's not what I asked." His tone was matter-of-fact, without judgment or pity. "Got family and town friends?" Eliza lifted her chin. "I don't need charity, Mr. Briggs." "Name's Calder." He pulled out a leather pouch, counting coins. "And I'm not offering charity." She watched him count out $2 in silver. "A fortune." "I won't. I can't. I run a ranch about 10 miles north. 3 Pines. Lost my cook last month when she married the blacksmith." He held out the coins. "Works hard. But it's honest. Roof over your head. 3 meals a day. Fair wages. That is, if you can cook." Eliza stared at the money, then at him. "Why would you offer this to a stranger? You don't know me." "Know enough." Calder's expression didn't change. "Know you said no to Jake Morrison when saying yes would have meant a warm bed tonight. Know you're standing in the cold with pride intact rather than trade it for comfort." He paused. "That tells me plenty about who you are. People will talk. They'll tell you things about me, about why I left Kansas. People talk about me too." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Doesn't make any of it true." The wind gusted, driving ice crystals against the buildings. Eliza felt the last of her strength wavering. She had 2 choices: take this stranger's offer or try to survive another night on the streets. By morning, she might be desperate enough to reconsider Jake Morrison's proposition. "I can cook," she said finally. "Not fancy, but filling. That's all I need." He put the coins in her hand, closing her fingers around them. "This is for supplies and anything else you might need before we leave. Meet me at Murphy's General Store at dawn. We'll head out after." Just like that, you'd trust me with your money. You could run off with it. He agreed. Buy a ticket on the next stage out of town, but you won't. "How do you know?" This time, his smile was real, transforming his weathered features. "Because you're the kind of woman who says no to Jake Morrison on the coldest night of the year. That kind of woman shows up when she says she will." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to go. Eliza found her voice. "Mr. Briggs Calder." He paused, looking back. "The coat. Keep it for now. Wyoming nights aren't getting any warmer." He started walking again, then called over his shoulder. "And miss, whatever you're running from, it won't follow you to 3 Pines. I'll see to that." Eliza stood in the swirling snow, watching until he disappeared into the darkness. The coins in her hand were solid, real, not charity, but wages for work not yet done. For the first time in months, the tight band around her chest eased just a little. She made her way to Murphy's store, where the proprietor's wife took pity and let her sleep by the stove in exchange for sweeping up. Eliza purchased warm stockings, a bar of soap, and a small bag of peppermints, an indulgence she immediately regretted but couldn't return. Dawn came like a reluctant visitor, gray and grudging. Eliza waited outside the store, wearing her new stockings under her old boots, Calder's duster wrapped tight around her. She twisted her dark hair into a severe bun and scrubbed her face until it shone. If she was going to be a ranch cook, she'd look the part. The creak of wagon wheels announced his arrival. Calder drove a sturdy buckboard loaded with supplies, 2 horses tied to the back. He jumped down, taking in her appearance with those observant eyes. Ready? Such a simple question, carrying so much weight. Was she ready to trust a stranger, ready to leave the familiar misery of running for the unknown challenges of staying ready to believe that somewhere in this harsh landscape, she might find a place to belong? Yes, Eliza said, and let him help her onto the wagon seat. As they rolled out of Snow Ridge, leaving behind the gossips and the Jake Morrisons and the closed doors, Eliza didn't look back. She focused instead on the mountains ahead, their peaks painted pink by the rising sun. Somewhere among those peaks was Three Pines Ranch, and a chance to prove that she was exactly who Calder Briggs had seen standing in the cold, a woman who could say no to what was wrong and yes to what might be right. The journey to a new life had begun. The wagon trail wound through white-blanketed valleys and pine forests that stood like dark sentinels against the snow. For the first hour, neither spoke. Eliza gripped the seat as the buckboard swayed over frozen ruts, stealing glances at the man beside her. Calder Briggs handled the reins with quiet competence, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried weight. Eliza had grown used to suspicious silences, accusatory ones, the kind that preceded harsh words or harsher judgments. This was different. This was the silence of vast spaces, of a man comfortable in his own company, of no expectations beyond the journey itself. "Storm coming in from the north," Calder said finally, nodding toward clouds massing like gray wool against the mountains. "We'll make it before it hits." "How can you tell?" "Wind shifted. Horses are getting restless." He adjusted his hat. "Live out here long enough, you learn to read the signs." They climbed steadily into the foothills. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance and snow. With each mile, Eliza felt something loosening in her chest. No one here knew her name beyond what she chose to tell them. No whispers followed her through these empty spaces. "There!" Calder pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between 3 tall pines. Three Pines Ranch. Even from a distance, Eliza could see it was well kept. The main house was built of logs and stone, smoke rising from 2 chimneys. A large barn stood to the east, with several smaller outbuildings scattered about. Fences marked pastures where horses moved like shadows against the snow. As they descended into the valley, dogs came running 2 shepherd mixes that circled the wagon with enthusiastic barks before Calder quieted them with a word. He pulled up before the house, and Eliza saw curtains at real glass windows, a covered porch swept clean of snow, small touches that spoke of care and permanence. "I'll show you around, then you can get settled." He helped her down, his hands steady and impersonal. "Kitchen's through here." The house was warmer than anything Eliza had known in months. They entered through a mudroom hung with coats and gear, then into a kitchen that made her catch her breath. A massive iron stove dominated one wall, with copper pots hanging from hooks above. The floor was worn smooth from years of use, the pine table scarred but clean. Shelves held dishes, preserves, sacks of flour and beans. Pantries there, root cellar entrances outside. Springhouse for milk and butter is past the barn. Calder moved through the space with the efficiency of someone showing a new employee their workspace. "You'll cook 3 meals for me, and the hands usually about 6 men, sometimes more during roundup. They eat in here for breakfast and supper. Take dinner out to wherever they're working." Eliza ran her hand along the table's surface, already imagining it laden with food. "It's well stocked. Tom Martinez brings supplies from town every 2 weeks. Make a list of what you need." He paused at another doorway. "This way." They moved through the house, a main room with a stone fireplace and shelves of books that surprised her. A small office, stairs leading up. At the end of a hallway, he opened a door. "This'll be your room." Eliza stepped inside and promptly burst into tears. It was a simple room, a bed with a quilted cover, a washstand with pitcher and bowl, a small wardrobe, a chair by the window. A rag rug covered the floor, and someone had placed dried flowers in a vase on the windowsill. After months of cold streets and hostile boarding houses, the modest space might have been a palace. "I'm sorry," she gasped, mortified by her reaction. I haven't." "No need for apologies." Calder shifted uncomfortably, the way men do around women's tears. "Take your time settling in. Supper's usually at 6. Tonight it's just stew I made yesterday. So no need to cook. Tomorrow's soon enough to start." He left her there, closing the door quietly. Eliza sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. She'd expected a cot in a corner somewhere. Maybe a curtained-off space if she was lucky. Not this. Not privacy and dignity and a door she could close. After washing her face and changing into her other dress, only slightly less worn than the first, Eliza ventured back to the kitchen. True to his word, a pot of stew simmered on the stove. She found bowls, sliced bread from a loaf in the pantry, set 2 places at the table, small acts that felt like coming home. Calder appeared as she ladled out the stew. He'd washed up too, his hair damp at the edges. They ate in companionable quiet until he said, "Good bread." "I didn't make it." "I know, Mrs. Baker in town did. But you warmed it right, didn't burn it." A slight smile. "That's more than some have managed." After supper, Eliza insisted on washing up while Calder tended to evening chores. When he returned, she was exploring the pantry, making mental lists. Find everything. "Yes, though I'll need a few things. Baking powder, more salt, eggs if the hens are laying." "They are. Coops past the barn. You'll hear them in the morning." He hung his hat on a peg. "One more thing." He led her back to the main room, to a shelf she hadn't noticed. Her books lined it: a Bible, a volume of poetry, a cookbook her mother had given her, the books she'd sold one by one for food, except these 3 hidden in her carpet bag. "How did you—" "Saw them when I helped you into the wagon. Figured they were important if you kept them through everything else." He pulled another book from a different shelf, handed it to her. "This might help too. Ranch cooking's different from town cooking." It was a practical guide to frontier housekeeping. Eliza clutched it like a lifeline. "Thank you." "No thanks needed. Just good business sense to help you succeed." But his gruff tone didn't match the kindness of the gesture. That night, Eliza lay in her own bed, listening to the wind rise outside. The promised storm had arrived, but she was warm, fed, safe behind solid walls. She should sleep, but her mind kept circling back to Calder's hands. Not what those hands had done, but what they hadn't. He'd helped her from the wagon, shown her around, handed her books. Each time, his touch had been brief, respectful, careful. After months of dodging grasping fingers and suggestive touches, the absence of threat felt like a gift. Morning came with pale light through her window and the sound of a rooster's crow. Eliza dressed quickly and found the kitchen already warm. Calder stoking the stove. "Hans'll be in soon," he said by way of greeting. "Coffee's the first requirement." She set to work, falling into rhythms half-remembered from better times. By the time Boots stomped on the porch, she had coffee hot and thick, biscuits in the oven, bacon sizzling. The men who filed in were a varied lot, young Sam barely out of his teens, the Martinez brothers who'd come up from Mexico, old Walter with silver in his beard, a few others. They touched their hats politely, murmured, "Ma'am," and fell on the food like wolves. "Best biscuits we've had in months," Walter declared, reaching for his third. "Don't get too excited," Eliza warned, though she flushed at the praise. "This is the easy part. Wait until you see what I do with the noon meal." But the noon meal went well too, as did supper. Days settled into routine. Up before dawn to start breakfast, pack dinner pails, begin bread for tomorrow. The men were respectful, even friendly as they grew used to her presence. Calder appeared for meals, sometimes lingering over coffee to discuss ranch business or the weather, but never intruding on what he clearly considered her domain. It was the third night when her hands betrayed her. She was washing dishes when Calder noticed the cracks hadn't healed, despite the warmth and regular food. Blood seeped from the deepest fissures as she worked. "Let me see." He took her hands before she could protest, examining them in the lamplight. His own hands were calloused but gentle. "Why didn't you say something?" "They're fine. Just need time to heal." "They need help healing." He released her, went to a cupboard, returned with a tin of salve. "Sit." Too surprised to argue, Eliza sat. Calder pulled up another chair, took her right hand, began working the salve into the damaged skin. His touch was clinical but careful, thorough but not lingering. The salve smelled of mint and something medicinal. "Ranch works hard on hands," he said quietly, focused on his task. "No shame in needing help." Most people would say there's shame in how they got this way. The words slipped out before she could stop them. His movements never faltered. Most people say a lot of things. Doesn't make them worth listening to. He started on her left hand. "These hands have worked hard. That's all that matters." Eliza watched him work. This man who'd taken her on faith, who noticed her hurt hands, but not in the way that demanded explanation. When he finished, he capped the salve, set it beside her. "Use this morning and night. In a week. They'll be good as new." Calder. She rarely used his name, and it felt strange on her tongue. "Why are you doing this, all of this?" He stood, putting the chair back precisely where it belonged. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My mother used to say you could judge a person by how they treated those who couldn't fight back, by how they acted when they thought no one was watching." He met her eyes. "I watched you that night in town. You had every reason to give in, and you didn't. That told me what kind of person you are." "And what kind is that?" "The kind that deserves better than Jake Morrison pawing at them in an alley." His expression hardened slightly. The kind that shouldn't have to trade away pieces of themselves just to survive. He bid her good night and left, but Eliza sat in the kitchen long after, rubbing salve into her hands and thinking about unexpected kindness. Outside, snow fell steadily, blanketing the world in white. But inside was warmth and light and the promise of healing. For the first time since leaving Kansas, she began to believe she might survive after all. Not just survive, perhaps even live again. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure, like spring water running beneath winter ice, waiting for the thaw. The blizzard struck Three Pines Ranch with the fury of a wounded beast. For 2 days, snow fell so thick that the barn disappeared from view, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. The men couldn't work, holed up in the bunkhouse, venturing out only to tend the stock. Calder made his way to the house 3 times a day for meals, arriving crusted with snow despite the rope line he'd strung between buildings. It was the second night of the storm when the nightmares came for Eliza. She woke, gasping, sheets soaked with sweat despite the cold, Royce Blackwell's voice still echoing in her ears. In her dream, he'd found her here, stood in her doorway with that smile that never reached his eyes, holding papers that branded her a thief and worse. The accusations he'd crafted so carefully, the missing funds from his bank, the forged signatures, the implications about what she'd done to earn special favors, all lies that had destroyed her life in Kansas. She couldn't go back to sleep, wrapped in a blanket. She crept to the kitchen, thinking to make tea. The fire in the stove had burned low, and she knelt to add wood, her hands shaking from more than cold. When she turned, a cup of warm milk sat on the table. She hadn't heard Calder come in. He must move like a ghost when he chose. The milk was sweetened with honey, a luxury she hadn't expected. She sat and drank, letting the warmth spread through her. In the morning, neither mentioned it. But the next night, when sleep again eluded her, she found another cup waiting. This time, A note lay beside it. Storm should break tomorrow. The third night, she caught him in the act. She'd come downstairs earlier, unable to face her bed at all, and found him heating milk at the stove. "I didn't mean to wake you," she said softly. "You didn't." He poured milk into 2 cups this time. "I don't sleep well during storms. Too many animals to worry about." They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, lamplight painting golden circles in the darkness. Outside, wind rattled the windows. "Do you want to talk about it?" His question was gentle, without pressure. Eliza stared into her cup. "What makes you think there's something to talk about?" "You cry out sometimes, in your sleep." Shame flooded her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Nothing to apologize for. We all have ghosts." He was quiet a moment. "Sometimes it helps to let them into the light. They seem smaller that way." The kindness undid her. The story spilled out in halting pieces how Royce Blackwell had pursued her relentlessly. A wealthy banker used to getting what he wanted. How she'd refused his advances, thinking her position as a respectable seamstress protected her. How he'd planted evidence, manipulated books, turned her rejection into an elaborate revenge. "He said no one would believe me over him. He was right." Her voice broke. "My own family. My father said I must have encouraged him somehow, that no man would go to such lengths without reason." Calder's jaw tightened, but he let her finish. "The sheriff was Royce's cousin. The judge owed him money. I ran before the trial, which made me look guilty. But what choice did I have? They would have sent me to prison. Or worse. This Blackwell, he's still looking for you." "I don't know. Maybe. He's not a man who likes to lose." Calder stood, paced to the window where snow swirled against the glass. When he turned back, his expression was carved from stone. "If he comes here, he'll find things are different than in Kansas. You don't know him. He has money, influence. I have something better." "What's that?" "The truth, and a Winchester rifle." He returned to the table. "But more importantly, you're not alone now. The men here, they've come to respect you. Mrs. Baker in town asks after you every time I go in. You're building a life here. Eliza, that matters." She wanted to believe him. What if he's already sent word? What if people here know? Then they know someone's version, not the truth. His certainty was a solid thing. I've learned to judge people by what I see, not what I hear. And what I see is a woman who works hard, treats everyone fairly, and makes the best biscuits in Wyoming territory. Despite everything, she smiled. "That's what convinces you of my innocence, my biscuits." That, and the fact that you were willing to freeze rather than compromise yourself. Thieves and worse don't stand in blizzards with their principles intact. The storm did break the next morning, leaving a world transformed. Drifts reached the eaves in places, and the men spent days digging out. Eliza threw herself into feeding them, making hearty stews and endless pots of coffee, finding comfort in the simple rhythm of honest work. It was 2 weeks later when she accompanied Calder to town for supplies. She'd been dreading it, but they needed things she couldn't specify without seeing them. The trip was quiet, Calder seeming to sense her nervousness. Snow Ridge looked smaller in daylight, less threatening. Still, Eliza pulled her bonnet forward and kept close to Calder as they entered Murphy's general store, Mrs. Murphy greeted them warmly, asking after Eliza's health and praising the preserved peaches she'd sent to town with Calder last week. They were selecting fabric when Eliza heard it, a familiar voice that made her blood freeze. "I'm looking for a woman. About this tall, dark hair, goes by Eliza Monroe." She turned slowly. A man stood at the counter, showing a photograph to Mr. Murphy. Not Royce himself, but she recognized him, James DeWitt, one of Blackwell's men. Calder's hand touched her elbow, steady and grounding. "Keep shopping," he murmured, then strode to the counter. "Help you with something?" His tone was pleasant, but Eliza caught the steel underneath. DeWitt looked him over, taking in the worn clothes and calloused hands, dismissing him as unimportant. "Private business. I'm looking for this woman. Mr. Blackwell of Kansas City is offering a substantial reward for information about her whereabouts." "That's so?" Calder examined the photograph with apparent interest. "What'd she do?" "Stole from Mr. Blackwell's bank, forged documents, other things." DeWitt's smile was oily. "Mr. Blackwell is anxious to see justice done." "I bet he is." Calder handed back the photograph. "Haven't seen her, but if I do, wire Mr. Blackwell directly. As I said, the reward is substantial." "I'll keep that in mind." DeWitt left, the bell above the door clanging. Calder returned to Eliza, who stood frozen beside bolts of calico. "He'll be back," she whispered. "He'll ask others." "Already has Mrs. Baker sent her boy to warn me this morning." He selected a bolt of blue fabric, held it up to the light. "This would suit you." "How can you talk about fabric? Didn't you hear—" "I heard a man spreading poison. Also heard Mrs. Baker tell him she didn't hold with men who chase women across territories. Tom Martinez suggested he try the next town over. Even Morrison, drunk as he was, said he hadn't seen any woman matching that description. He added the blue fabric to their purchases. Seems folks here have poor memories when it comes to strangers asking questions." At the counter, Mr. Murphy tallied their goods without mentioning DeWitt's visit. As he wrapped their purchases, he said quietly, "My wife's sister had trouble with a persistent man once. Terrible how some fellows can't accept a lady's refusal. Just terrible." The ride home was silent until they reached Three Pines Land. Then Calder said, "He'll be back, Blackwell himself, eventually. Men like that can't let things go." "I should leave. I've brought trouble." "Only trouble you've brought is teaching Walter he can't have 4 biscuits at breakfast and still button his vest." He guided the wagon around a drift. "This is your home now. Eliza, we protect our own here." That night, she found no cup of milk waiting. Instead, Calder sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his rifle. The Winchester gleamed in the lamplight as he worked oil into the metal. "Just maintenance," he said, but they both knew better. Sheriff Langley rode out the next day, a lean man with intelligent eyes who accepted coffee and listened to Eliza's story without interruption. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I know Blackwell by reputation. Also know his type men who think money makes them kings." He stood, adjusted his gun belt. "Can't do much about Kansas warrants, but I can make it clear that harassment isn't tolerated in my jurisdiction. Man wants to pursue legal channels. He's welcome to try. But if he thinks he can intimidate folks here, he'll learn different." After he left, Eliza stood at the window watching snow fall on distant peaks. Calder joined her, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Scared?" he asked. "Yes?" "Good. Means you're not foolish. But being scared and being alone are 2 different things." He turned to face her. "You've got a place here, Eliza. Not just a job, a place. That's worth fighting for." She thought of cold alleys and closed doors, of hunger and desperation. Then she looked around this kitchen where she'd found purpose, at this man who'd offered trust without conditions. "You're right," she said quietly. "It is worth fighting for." Outside, winter held the land in its grip, but spring would come. It always did. And when it arrived, Eliza intended to be here to see it, ghosts and all. The morning Royce Blackwell arrived at Three Pines Ranch dawned clear and cold, ice crystals glittering on fence posts like scattered diamonds. Eliza was kneading bread when she heard the horses too many for ordinary visitors. Through the flour-dusted window, she saw 3 riders approaching, and her heart seized. Even at a distance, she recognized Royce's bearing, that self-assured posture of a man who'd never been denied anything he wanted. He rode a fine black gelding, flanked by 2 men she didn't recognize. Hard men, wearing guns low on their hips. Stay inside. Calder had materialized in the kitchen doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour. His Winchester leaned against the wall, and his Colt sat easy in its holster. No matter what you hear, stay inside. Calder, promise me. Eliza. She nodded, throat tight. He studied her face for a moment, then walked out to meet trouble head-on. Through the window, she watched the confrontation unfold. Calder stood on the porch steps, relaxed but ready. The ranch hands had noticed too. She saw Sam near the barn, Walter by the corral, both armed, both watching. Royce dismounted with theatrical flair, his city clothes absurdly out of place against the working ranch. Even from here, Eliza could see his smile, that cold, possessive expression she remembered too well. Mr. Briggs, I presume. Royce's voice carried clearly in the still air. I'm Royce Blackwell, from Kansas City. I believe you're harboring a fugitive. That's so. Calder's response was mild. Don't recall any fugitives asking for work here. Come now, let's not play games. Royce pulled papers from his coat. I have warrants for the arrest of Eliza Monroe on charges of theft and fraud. I know she's here. Mind if I see those papers? Royce handed them over with obvious reluctance. Calder took his time reading, though Eliza suspected he was using the moments to think rather than study legal documents. Interesting accusations, Calder said finally. Though I notice these are Kansas warrants, no federal authority, and Sheriff Langley hasn't mentioned any Wyoming warrants coming through. The crimes were committed in Kansas. Alleged crimes. Calder folded the papers, handed them back. And Kansas is a long way from here. Royce's face darkened. I've come to take her back, one way or another. Have you now? Calder shifted slightly, his hand resting casual near his gun. Well, Mr. Blackwell, here's the thing. Even if Miss Monroe was here, which I'm not saying she is, I don't much care for men who chase women across territories. Makes a man wonder what really happened back in Kansas. What happened is she stole from me. Royce's composure cracked, revealing the rage underneath. She led me on, took my gifts, then tried to extort money. Funny thing about that. Calder's voice remained conversational. The Eliza Monroe I know won't even accept a cup of coffee without trying to pay for it. Doesn't sound like someone who'd take gifts from a man, let alone steal from him. One of Royce's men shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his gun. Immediately, the click of multiple hammers being cocked echoed across the yard. Sam had a rifle trained from the barn loft. Walter and two other hands had emerged from various buildings, all armed. Easy, boys. Calder called, though his eyes never left Royce. Mr. Blackwell was just leaving. I'm not going anywhere without her. Royce stepped forward, and suddenly Calder's Colt was in his hand, not pointing at anyone, but present nonetheless. Yes, Calder said quietly. You are. The moment stretched taut. Then Royce laughed, an ugly sound. You think you can protect her? I have influence, money, connections. I'll bury you in this ranch. Maybe, but you'll have to do it from Kansas. Calder's voice hardened. Because if you're not off my land in the next minute, Sheriff Langley will be investigating why 3 men came to my ranch making threats. Don't imagine that would look good for a respectable banker. This isn't over. Royce's hands clenched. She's a thief and a... Choose your words real careful. For the first time, Calder's gun hand tensed. Real careful. Royce swallowed whatever he'd been about to say. He jerked his head at his men, mounted with considerably less grace than he'd dismounted. But before leaving, he played his final card. Ask her about the money. Briggs, ask her about the signatures on those bank drafts. Ask her what she was willing to do to keep her position at the bank. His smile was vicious. Then ask yourself if she's worth losing everything for. They rode off in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Calder stood motionless until they disappeared over the ridge. then holstered his gun with deliberate calm. "Back to work, boys," he called. The hands dispersed, though Eliza noticed they stayed watchful. Calder entered the kitchen to find her sitting at the table, hands folded to hide their shaking. He poured 2 cups of coffee, sat across from her. "He'll be back," she said dully. "He won't give up." "Probably not." Calder sipped his coffee. "Man like that can't stand losing. You should have let him take me. This isn't your fight. Made it my fight when I offered you a job." He set down his cup. "But I need to know, Eliza. Not because I believe him, but because I need to know what weapons he'll use. The money, the signatures. What's the truth of it?" She closed her eyes, transported back to that gleaming bank office. "Royce pursued me for months. Flowers, gifts, invitations I always refused. He couldn't believe a seamstress would reject him. Then he offered me a position at the bank filing papers. Simple clerk work. The pay was 3 times what I made sewing. I needed the money for my mother's medicine. So you took the job. I thought I could manage it, keep things professional. But he grew more insistent, more inappropriate. When I threatened to quit, he said I couldn't, that I'd signed papers, employment contracts. Later, I learned he'd slipped forgeries among routine documents. My signature on withdrawal authorizations, loan papers. And the money, $500 went missing. He had witnesses who'd seen me near the vault, forged documents with my signature, my word against his and 2 bank employees he'd paid off. She opened her eyes, met his steady gaze. I ran the night before they planned to arrest me. Left my dying mother, my whole life. But I didn't steal from him. Calder. The only thing I took was myself." He nodded slowly. "I know." "How can you know? How can you be sure I'm not everything he says?" "Because I've watched you these past months. Seen how you handle money, how you treat people, how you carry yourself." He leaned forward. "Thieves don't flinch when someone offers them $2. Calculating women don't cry over being given a simple room. And whoever you were in Kansas, the woman I know here is honest down to her bones." Tears ran down her face. "I've brought danger to your door. He won't stop." "Then neither will we." He stood, walked around the table, knelt beside her chair. "Listen to me, Eliza. I've faced rustlers, claim jumpers, harder men than Royce Blackwell. This ranch, these people were not some Kansas bank he can manipulate. He wants a fight, we'll give him one." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would you risk everything for me?" His hand covered hers on the table. "Because everyone deserves a chance to build something better. Because you've made this place a home. Not just a ranch. Because—" He stopped, jaw tightening. Because I've gotten used to seeing you in my kitchen." The admission seemed pulled from him. "Gotten used to your laugh when Sam tells his terrible jokes. Used to watching you feed the barn cats when you think no one's looking. Can't imagine going back to the way things were before." Eliza turned her hand palm up, laced her fingers through his. "I'm scared. Calder." "I know. But you're not alone." He squeezed gently. "We'll face whatever comes. Together." That afternoon, Sheriff Langley arrived with news. Blackwell's staying at the hotel, making noise about jurisdiction and justice. Filed a formal complaint about being threatened at gunpoint. "Was he threatened?" Calder asked innocently. "Not that I saw. Though several witnesses mentioned he was asked to leave private property after making unsubstantiated accusations." Langley accepted coffee from Eliza. Also had an interesting telegraph from a sheriff in Kansas. "Seems Mr. Blackwell's bank is under investigation. Something about irregular loans and missing funds beyond what he accused you of. Miss Monroe." Eliza's cup rattled against its saucer. "What?" "Appears when state investigators started looking into his accusations against you, they found other irregularities. Loans to businesses that don't exist. Money moved to personal accounts." Langley smiled grimly. "Sometimes, when men point fingers, they forget 3 point back at themselves." Will it be enough? Calder asked. To clear Miss Monroe eventually. To make Blackwell leave, that's up to him. The sheriff stood. But I'll be keeping a close eye on things, and I've made it clear that any harassment or vigilante action will be met with the full force of the law. That night, Eliza couldn't eat. She moved through dinner preparations mechanically, serving the hands, cleaning up. Calder stayed after the others left, helping dry dishes. Stop blaming yourself, he said quietly. How can I not if he ruins you, destroys the ranch? He won't. Simple certainty. You can't know that. I know I'd rather fight beside you than live peacefully without you. The plate slipped from her nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor. They both knelt to collect the pieces, hands touching as they reached for the same shard. Calder. I'm not good with words. Eliza. But I know what I feel. Known for weeks now. His thumb traced her knuckles. You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not affection, but you should know where I stand. She looked at this man who'd stood between her and danger without hesitation, who'd offered trust when the world offered suspicion. I know where you stand. You've shown me every day. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I know where I stand too. He helped her to her feet, glass forgotten. For a moment they stood close, the kitchen warm around them, possibility hanging in the air like morning mist. Then boots stomped on the porch. Walter needing something from the storage shed, and the moment passed. But something had shifted, fundamental as the earth beneath their feet. Whatever came next, they would face it as more than employer and employee, more than protector and protected. They would face it together, united against whatever storm Royce Blackwell brought to their door. The second confrontation came 3 days later, and this time Royce Blackwell brought the law, or his version of it. Eliza was hanging laundry when she saw the dust cloud of multiple riders, her hands stilled on the wet sheet, dread pooling in her stomach. Eliza! Sam appeared at her elbow, rifle in hand. Calder says get inside, now! She dropped the linens and ran. Through the kitchen window, she counted 8 men Royce, his 2 hired guns, and 5 others, including a man wearing a badge. Not Sheriff Langley, but someone official enough to make this legal. Calder stood on the porch again, but this time Walter flanked him on the left, Tom Martinez on the right. The other ranch hands positioned themselves strategically around the yard. Hey, Mr. Briggs. The badge-wearing man dismounted. I'm Deputy Marshal Harrington from Cheyenne. I have federal papers for the arrest of one Eliza Monroe. Eliza's knees nearly buckled. Federal papers changed everything. Calder had been right about Kansas warrants holding no authority here, but a federal marshal. Mind if I examine those papers? Calder's voice carried no hint of the tension Eliza felt. I do mind, actually. Harrington was younger than Langley, with the self-important air of new authority. Mr. Blackwell has provided substantial evidence of interstate fraud. The woman crossed state lines with stolen funds, making this federal jurisdiction. Has he now? Calder descended the steps slowly. And you verified this evidence personally? Aye, mister. Blackwell is a respected banker, who's currently under investigation in Kansas for financial irregularities. Sheriff Langley rode into view, badge glinting in the morning sun. 2 deputies accompanied him. Morning. Harrington, bit far from your usual territory, aren't you? The federal deputy shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff, this is federal business. Is it because I received some interesting telegraphs this morning? Langley dismounted, pulled papers from his vest, including one from Federal Marshal Thompson in Cheyenne, saying he never authorized any deputy to pursue Kansas warrants. Another from the Kansas State Banking Commission about Mr. Blackwell here being wanted for questioning. Royce's composed mask slipped. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. Are you? Langley turned to him. Because according to this, 3 other women have come forward with similar stories. Young women you pursued, who rejected you, who then mysteriously had money go missing from accounts they handled. The yard went very still. One of Royce's hired men shifted nervously, hand moving toward his gun. I wouldn't. Walter's voice was conversational, but his rifle was aimed steady. Less you want to explain to the real federal marshals why you drew on local law.
This is all lies, Royce snarled. Fabrications to protect that thieving.
Mr. Blackwell. Eliza stepped onto the porch, head high despite her trembling hands. I think it's time for truth. Eliza, no, Calder started, but she raised a hand. He won't stop until he hears it from me. She descended the steps, stopping just out of Royce's reach. You want to know what I stole from you? I'll tell you. I stole your pride. A simple seamstress dared to say no to the great Royce Blackwell. That's my only crime.
You led me on.
I was polite to a customer. You decided that meant more than it did. Her voice grew stronger. When I refused your gifts, you called me coy. When I declined your invitations, you said I was playing games. When I tried to quit, you trapped me with forged papers.
Prove it,
he hissed. I can't. You made sure of that. She lifted her chin. But these good people don't need proof. They've seen who I am, day after day. They've judged me by my actions, not your accusations. Pretty speech. Roy stepped forward, and immediately multiple guns swung his direction. He froze. But speeches won't hold up in court. Neither will your evidence, Mr. Blackwell. Everyone turned. A woman in traveling clothes stood beside a newly arrived buggy, middle-aged, well-dressed, with steel in her spine and eyes like winter ice. Harriet Royce went pale. What are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess. Again. Harriet Blackwell looked at her husband with undisguised contempt. Though this time, I'm done enabling you. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, just as I understood about Miss Carson in Topeka, Miss Davis in St. Louis. She pulled papers from her bag. I've brought bank records, Royce, real ones, including the account where you've been hiding the money you accuse these women of stealing. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Deputy Harrington looked between the papers Langley held and Mrs. Blackwell's evidence, his confidence evaporating. I think, Sheriff Langley said mildly, we need to sort this out properly, Mr. Blackwell. You'll come with me, voluntarily, or otherwise. This is a mistake, Royce blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. I have influence. Had influence, his wife corrected. Past tense, your father's bank discharged you this morning. The family name will survive your disgrace, but you won't hide behind it anymore. As Langley's men moved to flank Royce, he made one last desperate play. She's nothing a nobody seamstress who should have been grateful. The crack of Calder's fist against Royce's jaw was deeply satisfying. The banker crumpled, blood streaming from his nose. That's for the lady's honor, Calder said calmly, rubbing his knuckles. Sheriff, I hope that won't complicate your arrest. What assault? Langley asked innocently. I saw a man trip over his own arrogance. Happens all the time. They took Royce away, along with his hired men. Deputy Harrington slunk off with mumbled apologies about misunderstandings. The ranch hands dispersed, though not before Sam clapped Eliza on the shoulder and Walter offered his gap-toothed grin. Harriet Blackwell remained, standing in the morning sun like judgment itself. Miss Monroe. Eliza faced her squarely. Mrs. Blackwell, I owe you an apology. Had I acted sooner, spoken up about his previous indiscretions, you might have been spared this ordeal. You don't owe me anything. Nevertheless, Harriet pulled another paper from her bag. This is a signed statement clearing your name, witnessed and notarized. Also, a bank draft for $500, the amount you were accused of stealing, plus interest. I can't accept. You can and you will. Harriet's tone brooked no argument. Consider it a small recompense for what you've endured, what all of his victims have endured. She returned to her buggy, pausing at the step. Miss Monroe, that backbone of yours, don't ever let anyone convince you it's a flaw. The world needs more women who can't be bought or bullied. After she left, Eliza stood in the yard, paper and bank draft clutched in nerveless fingers. Free. After months of running, hiding, looking over her shoulder, free. Eliza called her, touched her elbow gently. Are you all right? She turned into his arms without thought, pressing her face against his chest as sobs shook her frame. Not tears of sadness or fear, but release. His arms came around her, solid and sure, holding her as the storm passed. It's over, she gasped between sobs. It's really over. It is. His hand stroked her hair, clumsy but comforting. You're safe now. She pulled back enough to see his face.
You hit him.
Seemed like the thing to do. He examined his split knuckles with satisfaction. Man insulted a lady under my protection. Couldn't let that stand. Your protection, despite everything, she smiled. Is that what I am? Among other things. His thumb wiped a tear from her cheek. If you'll allow it. The yard was empty now, the hands giving them privacy with the tact of men who understood some moments shouldn't have witnesses. Eliza reached up, touched the spot where his jaw tensed. Calder Briggs, I need to say something, and I need to say it clear. She took a breath. I don't need protecting. I have survived worse than Royce Blackwell. But I want something else from you. What's that? Partnership. Standing together. Not one in front of the other. Her hand moved to rest over his heart. Can you give me that? Eliza Monroe, he said solemnly. I'd give you anything you asked for, but that most of all. This time when boots sounded on gravel because there was always someone needing something on a working ranch they didn't spring apart. Let the world see. She was done hiding. Boss, Sam called. Sorry to interrupt, but we got that mare about to foal. Coming, Calder called back, but his eyes stayed on Eliza. We'll continue this conversation. We will, she promised. That evening, the kitchen felt different, lighter, as if the very air had been cleansed. The hands were boisterous at dinner, celebrating the day's victory. Even quiet Tom Martinez raised his coffee cup in toast. To Miss Eliza, who stands her ground. Later, as she and Calder worked side by side cleaning up, she made a decision. I want to ask you something, she said, and I want an honest answer. Always. When you offered to marry me to protect me from Royce, did you mean it? His hands stilled on the dish towel. Every word. Just for protection or for other reasons too. He set down the towel, turned to face her fully. Eliza, I'd have married you to keep you safe. Yes, but I'd have wanted to marry you anyway. Been thinking about it since the day you taught Walter he couldn't have unlimited biscuits. She laughed, surprising them both. That's what did it, my biscuit rationing. That's when I knew you'd fit here, when I started thinking about making it permanent. He stepped closer. But I didn't want you to feel obligated. Still don't. Good, because when I marry you, and I will marry you, Calder Briggs, it won't be from obligation or gratitude or even protection. She reached up, framed his face with her hands. It'll be because I choose you, because you gave me a place to heal, work to be proud of, and the space to be myself again. Because you make me want to be brave. You're already brave, he said roughly. Bravest woman I know. Then let me prove it. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and cold. But inside was warmth and light and the promise of a future no longer shadowed by the past. Eliza Monroe had come to Three Pines Ranch seeking shelter. What she'd found was so much more purpose, community, justice, and love. The girl who'd traded her mother's ring for bread had discovered something worth more than gold, a man who saw her truly and and a life worth fighting for. The wedding day dawned with a gentleness unusual for Wyoming territory, as if nature itself had decided to offer a blessing. Eliza stood before the small mirror in her room, hands trembling as she pinned up her hair. The blue dress Calder had chosen at Murphy's store had been transformed with careful stitching and a bit of lace misses. Baker had contributed. Not a traditional wedding dress, but it was hers, bought with honest wages and altered by her own hands. "Miss Eliza?" Sam's voice came through the door. "Calder sent me to ask if you need anything." She opened the door to find the young ranch hand standing awkwardly in his Sunday best, holding a small bouquet of winter roses and sage. "He said you might want these, Mrs. Baker grew the roses in her greenhouse." The gesture so thoughtful, so perfectly Calder made her eyes mist. "Thank you, Sam. Also said to tell you Sheriff Langley's here as witness, along with most of the town." His grin turned mischievous. "Think everyone wants to see the woman who stood up to Royce Blackwell get her happy ending?" The small church in Snow Ridge had never held so many people. As Eliza entered on Walter's offered arm, the old ranch hand had insisted on the honor. She saw faces that had become familiar over these months. Mrs. Baker dabbing at her eyes. Tom and Miguel Martinez in pressed shirts. Murphy and his wife. Even Jake Morrison looking shamefaced in a back pew. Sheriff Langley stood near the altar as witness, his presence a reminder of the law's protection. But Eliza had eyes only for Calder. He stood before Reverend Davis in his best suit, the one he wore for cattle sales and important business. His hair was slicked back, revealing the strong lines of his face, and his hands, those gentle, capable hands, were clasped calmly before him. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression. Wonder, maybe, or recognition, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Walter delivered her to Calder's side with gruff pride. "Take care of her, boss." "Every day," Calder promised, taking Eliza's hand. Reverend Davis began the familiar words, but Eliza barely heard them. She was too aware of Calder's presence, the warmth of his hand, the way his thumb stroked across her knuckles when he felt her tremble. "Before we continue," the Reverend said, "I believe Mr. Briggs has something to say." Calder turned to face not just Eliza, but the packed church. His voice carried strong and clear. "Most of you know why we're here, know what's led to this moment. I want to say something about that." Eliza's breath caught. They'd agreed to a simple ceremony, no speeches. Eliza Monroe came to Snow Ridge with nothing but pride and determination. She was tested by cold, hunger, and the cruelty of those who'd misjudge her. Some of you, his gaze swept the congregation, turned her away. Others looked aside when she needed help. The church was utterly silent. Mrs. Hartley shifted uncomfortably in her pew. But she survived. More than that, she thrived. She took honest work, treated everyone with respect, and proved her character daily through actions, not words. His voice roughened. "I'm not marrying her to save her. She already saved herself. I'm marrying her because I can't imagine my life without her in it, because she makes me want to be a better man, because I love her." "Calder?" Eliza whispered, tears streaming. "So I stand here today not as her protector, but as her partner, and I promise, we all promise, that Eliza Briggs will never again face the world alone." A murmur ran through the church. Approval and emotion mixed. Reverend Davis cleared his throat, obviously moved. "Well, I don't think I can improve on that. Shall we continue?" The vows were traditional, but the feeling behind them was anything but. When Calder slipped the simple gold band on her finger, not fancy, but solid and real, Eliza felt something settle deep in her chest. Home. This was home. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Calder cupped her face gently, as if she were precious and breakable. The kiss was soft, a promise more than passion. But the church erupted in cheers nonetheless. Sam whistled until Walter cuffed him, and Mrs. Baker openly wept into her handkerchief. As they turned to face their community as husband and wife, Eliza saw him. Royce Blackwell stood in the doorway, flanked by Sheriff Langley's deputies. His fine clothes were replaced with prison gray. His arrogant bearing diminished. The deputies had brought him to town for transfer to federal custody, and somehow, by accident or design, the timing coincided with the wedding. The church fell silent, tension crackling. Calder stepped slightly forward, but Eliza caught his arm. "No," she said quietly. "Let me—" She walked down the aisle, stopping before the man who'd tried to destroy her. Royce's eyes held fury, and something else, disbelief that this woman he dismissed as nothing stood before him in wedding finery, surrounded by people who'd chosen her over him. "I forgive you," Eliza said, loud enough for all to hear. "Not for your sake, but for mine. You have no power over me anymore. I hope someday you find whatever peace is possible for someone who's hurt so many."
"You think you've won?"
His voice was raw.
"You're nobody, a servant who got lucky."
"She's my wife." Calder had moved beside her, solid as the mountains. "And she's worth a dozen of you." 100, Walter called from his pew. 1,000, Mrs., Baker added firmly. One by one, voices rose from the congregation. Not taunts or anger, but simple affirmations of Eliza's worth. The seamstress who'd helped mend clothes for free. The cook who'd sent food to sick neighbors. The woman who'd shown grace under pressure and dignity in hardship. Royce seemed to shrink before their combined witness. The deputies led him away, and Eliza knew with bone-deep certainty she'd never see him again. That chapter was closed forever. The rest of the day passed in a blur of celebration. The reception at the ranch overflowed with food, laughter, and music from Miguel's guitar. Eliza danced with Calder, with Walter, with every ranch hand who shyly asked. Her face ached from smiling. Her heart felt too full for her chest. As evening painted the sky purple and gold, she found a moment of quiet on the porch. The party continued inside, but she needed air, space to absorb it all. "Hiding already," Calder joined her, 2 cups of punch in hand. "Thinking—" She accepted the cup, leaned into his warmth. "About how different this morning was from that night you found me outside the saloon. You were half frozen and desperate. Now you're radiating joy and wearing my ring." He smiled. "I'd say it's an improvement. I was so certain I'd never have this. A home, meaningful work, love." She turned to face him. "Real love, not the twisted thing Royce offered. The kind that sees you truly and chooses you anyway." "Eliza Briggs," he said softly. "You're going to make me emotional in front of the hands." She laughed, the sound carrying across the ranch. "Can't have that. Your reputation as a tough rancher would never recover." "Worth the risk." He set down his cup, drew her close. "Dance with me." "There's no music out here." "Don't need any." They swayed together on the porch, the sounds of celebration drifting through windows, stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring regular life breakfast for hungry ranch hands, chores and challenges and all the daily rhythms of 3 Pines. But tonight was theirs. "I love you," she said against his chest. "I should have said it in the church, but I was too overwhelmed. I love you. Calder Briggs." His arms tightened around her. "And I love you. Have since the day you made Walter return 2 biscuits to the platter." "You and those biscuits," she laughed. "I'm starting to think you married me for my cooking." "That too," he admitted. "But mostly for this, for the way you make every day better just by being in it." Sheriff Langley emerged onto the porch, tactfully clearing his throat. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say goodbye before heading back to town." They separated, though Calder kept his arm around Eliza's waist. "Thank you for coming, Sheriff, for everything." "My pleasure." Langley tipped his hat to Eliza. "Ma'am, you've brought something special to this community. We're lucky to have you." After he left, more guests trickled out to offer congratulations and farewells. By full dark, only the ranch hands remained, cleaning up with the efficiency of men who'd worked together for years. "Leave it," Calder ordered. "It'll keep until morning."
"Boss is right,"
Walter announced. "Man's got better things to do on his wedding night than worry about dirty dishes." The good-natured ribbing that followed was silenced by Eliza's laugh. "Gentlemen, thank you. For today. For everything. This is my family now, and I'm grateful for each of you." Sam blushed red. Tom and Miguel grinned, and Walter had to turn away to wipe his eyes. Get on with you both. Morning comes early, and these old bones need rest." Finally, blessedly, they were alone. Calder led her through the house, their house, to the room they would now share. He'd moved his things that morning, making space for her belongings. On the dresser sat a small wrapped package. "What's this?"
"Wedding gift. Open it."
Inside was a leather-bound journal, pristine pages waiting to be filled. The cover was embossed with her new initials, E.B. "For your thoughts, your recipes, whatever you want to preserve." He looked almost shy. "Figured after everything, you might want to write your own story." "Oh, Calder," she clutched the journal. This perfect gift from a man who understood her need to reclaim her narrative. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "Far from it. But I'm yours, flaws and all." "And I'm yours." She set down the journal, reached for him. "Forever." Outside, snow began to fall, gentle as a blessing. Inside, two souls who'd found each other against all odds celebrated the beginning of their shared life. The woman who'd once traded everything for survival had gained something worth more than security or comfort. She'd found a love that honored her strength, a partner who stood beside her as equal, and a future written not in fear, but in hope. The girl who'd said no to Jake Morrison in a frozen alley had said yes to Calder Briggs in a church full of witnesses. And that, Eliza thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms, made all the difference. Spring came to Three Pines Ranch like a kept promise, melting snow revealing green shoots that seemed impossibly brave after such a harsh winter. Eliza stood in what Calder had called her writing room, watching dawn paint the hills gold. The space had been a storage room when she first arrived, cramped and dusty. Now it held a desk Calder had built himself, shelves lined with books both old and new, and a window that framed the mountains like art. Already at work, Calder appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. "Just thinking." She accepted the cup gratefully. "The Hendricks children will be here soon for lessons. I want to be ready." The school had begun almost by accident. Word spread that the new Mrs. Briggs could read and cipher, had beautiful handwriting, and most importantly, patience with young ones. Emma Hendricks had approached first, shy but determined, asking if Eliza might teach her daughters their letters. Within a month, 6 children made the journey to Three Pines twice a week. "You've got that look," Calder observed. "The one that means you're planning something bigger." Eliza smiled. He knew her well after 6 months of marriage. "Mrs. Baker mentioned the old Campbell place in town. The house is falling down, but the barn's still solid. She wondered if with some work it might serve as a proper schoolhouse. And you want to do that work? The children deserve better than crowding around my kitchen table. And there are others in town who want to learn but can't make the journey here." She turned to face him. "I know it's a lot to ask." "It's not." He set down his coffee, crossed to take her hands. "Eliza, this ranch is successful because of you. Not just the cooking and keeping house, but the way you've made it a gathering place. The hands work harder knowing they're valued. Neighbors trade more fairly knowing you'll note any shortchanging. If you want to teach every child in Wyoming territory to read, I'll help build the desks." She kissed him, still marveling that she could simply do so whenever the mood struck. "Just Snow Ridge for now, but thank you." A commotion in the yard drew their attention. Through the window, they saw Sheriff Langley dismounting, his expression grim. Eliza's stomach tightened had Royce somehow reached out from prison. They met him on the porch. "Sheriff," Calder greeted. "Early for a social call." "Not social, I'm afraid." Langley removed his hat. "Mrs. Briggs, I have news from Kansas. Royce Blackwell is dead." The words hit like physical blows. Eliza gripped the porch rail. "How?" "Killed in prison 2 days ago. Another inmate. Dispute over gambling debts." The sheriff's expression was carefully neutral. "Thought you should hear it proper, not through gossip." "I see." Eliza's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Thank you for telling me." After Langley left, she stood frozen, trying to parse her feelings. Relief, sorrow. Calder's hand settled warm on her back. "Talk to me." "I don't know what to feel," she admitted. "He tried to destroy me, but I didn't wish him dead. Is it wrong that part of me feels free, finally? Completely free?" "Nothing wrong with that. Man made his choices, faced the consequences." Calder turned her gently to face him. "You gave him more grace than he deserved when you forgave him. What happened after isn't on your conscience." The children arrived before she could respond, tumbling from their father's wagon like puppies. Emma Hendricks, 12 and serious, helped her younger sisters down while the Johnson boys wrestled good-naturedly. "Mrs. Briggs." 6-year-old Lucy Hendricks ran to her, braids flying. "I practiced my letters all week, want to see." The enthusiasm was balm to her spirit. "Of course, dear one. Let's go inside and you can show me." The morning flew by in a chorus of young voices reciting alphabets and sounding out words. Eliza moved between them, correcting gently, praising often. When frustration struck, as it did when 8-year-old Tom Johnson struggled with a particularly difficult passage, she knelt beside him. "Remember what we said about difficult things?" "They're like breaking horses," Tom repeated dutifully. "Gotta be patient and keep trying."
Exactly. Now, let's try again.
By noon, when their fathers came to collect them, each child had made progress. Emma had finished her first complete book. The Johnson boys could write their names with flourishing pride, and little Lucy had mastered 5 new words. "You're a miracle worker," Jim Hendricks said, hat in hand. "Emma talks of nothing but these lessons. Says she wants to be a teacher like you someday." "She'd make a fine one," Eliza assured him. "She helps the younger ones without being asked." After the children left, trailing promises to practice and pleas for extra lessons, Eliza found Calder in the barn. He was working on something at his bench, wood shavings curling beneath his plane. "What's this?" "Desk, child-sized." He ran his hand over the smooth surface. "Figure if you're teaching regular, they should have proper furniture. This is just the first." Emotion clogged her throat. "You're building desks for my students." "Our students, this is a ranch family. Remember, their success is ours." He glanced at her. "Besides, Walter's been wanting to learn his letters. Too proud to ask, but I've seen him watching when you work with the children." "Oh, I'll ask him privately," Eliza promised. "Make it seem like he's doing me a favor by being a practice student." "You understand people." Calder set down his tools, pulled her close. "It's a gift." "Speaking of understanding, there's something I need to tell you." She took a breath. "I've been writing, not just journal entries, but stories, about women finding their strength, building new lives. I think others might want to read them." "Mrs. Baker knows a printer in Cheyenne who publishes serials for newspapers." "Then we should send them." "No hesitation, no surprise. You've got stories worth telling." "You don't think it's too ambitious, a ranch wife wanting to be published?" "I think you're Eliza Briggs, and you can do anything you set your mind to." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, you're already teaching, managing the ranch accounts, and keeping us all fed. What's one more accomplishment?" That evening, Eliza sat in her writing room, pen in hand, while Calder built a fire against the spring chill. The blank page no longer intimidated her. She'd filled dozens since winter, stories pouring out like water from a broken dam. She began to write, not about grand adventures or dramatic romances, but about ordinary women doing extraordinary things. The seamstress who opened her own shop, the widow who ran a stage stop, the teacher who brought learning to frontier children. Each story carried threads of her own experience, women choosing dignity over ease, work over dependence, hope over bitterness. "Read me what you've written," Calder said from his chair by the fire. She often did, using him as her first audience. His responses, a chuckle here, a thoughtful nod there, helped her gauge what resonated. Tonight's story was about a cook who saved enough to buy her own restaurant, facing down those who said a woman couldn't run such a business. She stood in her empty dining room. Eliza read. Tables waiting for customers who might never come. But beneath the fear lived something stronger, the knowledge that she'd rather fail at her own dream than succeed at someone else's. "That's good," Calder said quietly. "That's truth." They worked in companionable silence, she writing. He sketching plans for what looked like a bookshelf, the life they'd built wrapped around them like a quilt, warm and handmade and precious. A knock at the door interrupted. Sam stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Sorry to bother, but there's a woman at the gate. Says she's looking for work. Heard you might have need of help." Eliza and Calder exchanged glances. With the school growing and her writing taking time, she could use assistance. "Bring her in." Calder decided. The woman Sam escorted to the house was young, perhaps 20, with the hollow look Eliza recognized too well. Worn dress, careful posture, eyes that had seen too much. "I'm Sarah Walsh," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I heard in town that you might need help. I can clean, sew, cook some. I'm willing to learn anything." "Where are you from, Miss Walsh?" Eliza asked gently. "Denver, ma'am, but I can't go back there." Her hands twisted together. "I have references from before, but my last position ended badly. Not through any fault of mine, but someone with power decided to make trouble for you." Eliza's statement made Sarah's eyes widen. "How did you—" "Yes, the man of the house, he—" She stopped, shoulders hunching. "You don't need to explain." Eliza looked at Calder, saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. "Can you start tomorrow?" "You don't want to check my references. I've found that desperate women willing to work are usually exactly who they claim to be." Eliza smiled. "Besides, I'm an excellent judge of character. Ask anyone." "Even me," Walter said from the doorway. "Woman saw through my gruff act first day. Been properly civilized ever since." Sarah's laugh was shaky but real. Thank you so much." They settled her in the small room off the kitchen, provided her with warm clothes and hope. As Eliza helped her unpack her few belongings, Sarah whispered, "Is it true what they say in town that you stood up to a powerful man and won?" "With help," Eliza corrected. "No one wins alone, but yes, I survived him. You will too." That night, as she and Calder prepared for bed, he said, "You're building something bigger than a school." "What do you mean?" "A place where women can start over, where children can learn, where stories get told that might change minds." He drew her close. "I'm proud to be part of it." "We're building it together," she corrected. "None of this works without you. I provide the desks. You provide the dreams. And together we make them real." Outside their window, stars wheeled overhead, constant and bright. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the darkest season now planned for all the seasons to come. The writing room waited for tomorrow's stories. The kitchen waited for breakfast preparations and Sarah's first day. The school supplies waited for eager young hands. And Eliza Briggs, former seamstress, former fugitive, current teacher and writer and wife, waited for nothing. She'd learned that life was too precious and uncertain to postpone dreams. Every day was a gift to be unwrapped with grateful hands. Every small victory a stone in the foundation of the life she was building. The woman who'd once thought she was trading her last possession for mere survival had discovered the truth she'd been trading up all along. Trading fear for courage, isolation for community, desperation for purpose, and in Calder's steady presence, in the children's eager faces, in Sarah's tentative hope, she saw the ripples of her own transformation spreading outward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new stories to write and live. But tonight, safe in the home she'd helped create, loved by the man who saw her truly, surrounded by the life she'd built from ashes, Eliza Briggs was complete. Spring had given way to summer at Three Pines Ranch, and with it came the full flowering of Eliza's dreams. The old Campbell barn in town had been transformed into a proper schoolhouse through the combined efforts of the community. Calder and the ranch hands had repaired the roof and walls, while the townswomen had sewn curtains and painted the interior a cheerful yellow. The desks Calder built stood in neat rows, waiting for September's formal opening. But today, Eliza sat in her writing room, watching afternoon light dance across the pages of a letter that had arrived that morning. The Cheyenne Daily Leader wanted to publish her stories as a weekly serial. The editor praised her authentic voice of the frontier woman and offered a small but steady payment for each installment. Still staring at it, Calder leaned against the doorframe, amusement in his voice. "I keep thinking I'll blink and the words will change." She set the letter carefully on her desk. "They want to publish my stories. Calder, people across the territory will read them." "Good. About time the world heard what you have to say." He crossed to stand behind her chair, hands gentle on her shoulders. "What will you call the series?" "Hearts of the West. Each story about a different woman finding her way." She leaned back against him. "The first is about a cook who discovers she's braver than she knew." "I wonder who inspired that." His chuckle rumbled through her. "Speaking of inspiring women, Sarah's got news." They found Sarah in the kitchen, virtually glowing as she kneaded bread. Over the months, she'd blossomed from a frightened girl into a capable young woman. The hollow look had filled out with good food and safety, and her smile came readily now. "Tell Mrs. Briggs your news," Calder prompted. Sarah blushed prettily. "Tom Johnson's father offered me a position, running the household for him and the boys since their mother passed. It's a good offer, and..." Her blush deepened. "Mr. Johnson is a kind man, a good father." Eliza read between the lines, a widower with children. A young woman ready to build a life. "That's wonderful. Sarah, the boys already adore you from your help with their lessons. I wanted to ask, would you mind terribly? I know you took me in when I had nothing. And now you have something. That's exactly what we hoped for." Eliza embraced her. "Besides, you'll hardly be far. The Johnson place is only 3 miles off." "I'll still help with the school," Sarah promised. "The children need to learn, and you taught me how important that is." That evening brought the weekly gathering that had become tradition. Neighbors arrived with covered dishes and gossip. Children ran wild in the yard, and the men discussed cattle prices and weather patterns. But tonight held special significance. They would celebrate both Sarah's engagement and the schoolhouse completion. Mrs. Baker had brought her niece, a young woman named Catherine Harper, who'd recently arrived from St. Louis. "Used to teach at a finishing school," Mrs. Baker explained to Eliza. "But she got ideas about proper education for girls' mathematics and science along with needlework. They dismissed her for being too progressive." Eliza studied Catherine, taking in the determined chin and intelligent eyes. "Would you consider teaching here? We could use someone with formal training." "In a frontier schoolhouse?" Catherine's eyes lit up. "Teaching farmers' children and ranch hands, my former employers would be scandalized." She grinned. "When do I start?" As the evening progressed, Eliza found herself standing back, watching the life that flourished around her. Sarah laughing with Jim Johnson while his boys showed off their writing skills. Catherine deep in discussion with Emma Hendricks about geology. Calder and the ranch hands helping Walter slowly sound out words from a primer, the old cowboy finally admitting he wanted to read the Bible himself instead of relying on others.
Proud of what you've built.
Sheriff Langley appeared at her elbow, coffee in hand. We've all built it together. Maybe, but you're the heart of it. He was quiet a moment.
Got a letter from Kansas yesterday.
That investigation into Blackwell's bank turned up 12 more women he'd wronged over the years. Because of your courage in leaving, in surviving, they found the strength to speak up too. Eliza's throat tightened. I didn't know. Your ripples in a pond, Mrs. Briggs. You threw the stone, but the waves keep spreading. He tipped his hat. Thought you should know your stories helping others find their own courage. Later, as the gathering wound down, Eliza found herself at the old piano someone had donated to the schoolhouse. She'd mentioned once that her mother had taught her to play, and Calder had spent weeks finding an instrument that could survive the frontier. Her fingers found the keys, picking out a simple melody, one by one. Voices joined in old hymns that everyone knew, songs of home and hope. Sarah's sweet soprano blended with Walter's rusty bass, while the children added enthusiastic, if not entirely tuneful contributions.
Play Beautiful Dreamer,
someone called out. As she played, Eliza thought about dreams, the ones that died in Kansas, the ones reborn in Wyoming, the ones yet to come. Through the window, she could see the moon rising over the mountains, the same moon that had witnessed her desperate flight months ago. You're thinking too hard, Calder murmured beside her. I can always tell. Thinking about time, how much changes, how quickly. She let the last notes fade. A year ago, I was alone and afraid. Now
you're surrounded by people who'd fight for you, who learn from you, who love you.
He helped her stand.
Come on, let's go home.
They walked back to the ranch house under a canopy of stars, the sounds of departing wagons fading behind them. The house stood welcoming in the darkness, lamplight glowing in windows like watching eyes. In her writing room, Eliza lit the lamp and pulled out fresh paper. The story that wanted telling tonight wasn't fiction, but truth, her own story, or at least pieces of it. She'd been writing around it for months, using fiction to explore what direct words couldn't yet say. But tonight, with the editor's acceptance fresh in her mind and the warmth of community still glowing in her chest, she felt ready. The December wind howled through Snow Ridge like a wounded animal. She wrote, then stopped. Too dramatic. No, it had felt exactly that dramatic, that desperate. She continued. I stood at the edge of respectability, toes already over the line, deciding whether to jump or be pushed. That's when I learned the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes falling is really flying, if you can find the courage to spread your wings. A new story, Calder read over her shoulder. Old story. Mine, or at least parts of it. She set down the pen. Is it too much, too personal? I think it's necessary. Your fiction is powerful because it comes from truth. Maybe it's time to tell that truth straight out. Not all of it. Not names or places that could hurt others, but the heart of it, what it means to be a woman alone, what it takes to rebuild, what we're capable of when cornered. She traced the words with her finger. Other women need to know they're not alone in their struggles. Then write it. Tell them. She worked deep into the night while Calder read nearby, his presence a steady comfort. The story flowed not the ugly details of Royce's pursuit or the bitter cold of homeless nights, but the deeper truths, the strength found in desperation, the dignity maintained against all odds, the transformative power of being seen and valued for who you truly are. When she finally set down her pen, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Calder had fallen asleep in his chair, book open on his chest. She covered him with a blanket, then stepped onto the porch to greet the new day. The ranch spread before her, the barn where she'd learned to gather eggs without fear, the bunkhouse where good men had shown her respect, the kitchen where she'd found purpose in simple tasks. But it was more than buildings and land. It was a life built from choices, each one leading to the next, creating something larger than its parts. "You're up early." Calder joined her, blanket wrapped around his shoulders. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about. Good thoughts. The best, I was remembering what you said that first night, that I could have taken your $2 and run. You were right. I could have. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had. You'd have survived. You're too strong not to, but we'd both have missed out on this." He gestured to encompass everything: the ranch, their life, the future stretching ahead like an open road. "Calder, I need to tell you something." Concern flickered in his eyes. "What is it?" "I'm fairly certain we're going to need another room in the house, a small one, by spring." It took him a moment. Then understanding dawned, followed by joy so pure it took her breath away. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in the morning light while she laughed and protested and held on tight. "Are you sure?" "As sure as a woman can be about such things. I wanted to wait until I was certain." He kissed her thoroughly, then set her gently on her feet. "A baby. Our baby." "Our baby," she confirmed. "Who will grow up surrounded by love and learning and possibility. Who will never doubt their worth or have to trade dignity for survival. A child who will have your strength and stubbornness. And your kindness and steadiness." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in gold and shadow. The life they'd built surrounded them, tangible in buildings and fences, intangible in the connections that bound their community together. "No regrets?" Calder asked softly. Eliza thought of all the paths that had led here, the pain and fear and desperate choices. Would she change them if she could? Perhaps, but they'd shaped her, strengthened her, brought her to this moment. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Every step led me here, led me to you, led me home." Inside the house, Sarah was already starting breakfast, humming as she worked. Soon the hands would arrive. Hungry and cheerful, the ordinary rhythm of ranch life would continue. But underneath would pulse the extraordinary truth that lives could be remade, that love could bloom in unlikely soil, that even the darkest winter gave way to spring. Eliza Monroe had traded a ring for survival and found herself gifted with so much more. A wedding ring that symbolized partnership, not possession. A home built on mutual respect and shared dreams. And now, the promise of new life to carry their story forward. The woman who'd once stood shivering outside a saloon, choosing dignity over warmth, had discovered the greatest truth of all: when you refuse to trade away your essential self, the universe sometimes responds with abundance beyond imagining. As the breakfast bell rang and the new day officially began, Eliza Briggs, teacher, writer, wife, and soon-to-be mother, stepped forward to meet it with open arms and grateful heart. Autumn painted the Wyoming mountains in shades of gold and rust as Eliza sat in her writing room, pen poised over paper. Through the window, she could see the schoolhouse in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney where Catherine Harper was teaching the morning lessons. The sight filled her with quiet satisfaction. The school had grown from 6 students to nearly 30, with children coming from homesteads as far as 10 miles away. The baby moved within her, a gentle reminder of the future taking shape. At 7 months along, she'd had to let out all her dresses, but the inconvenience was nothing compared to the joy of carrying new life. Calder had taken to talking to her belly each night, telling the baby stories about the ranch, about horses and cattle and the wide sky that would be its inheritance. Mrs. Briggs, Sarah Johnson, for she'd married Jim in a sweet ceremony last month, knocked softly. "There's a letter from the newspaper, and visitors coming up the road." The letter contained another acceptance, along with payment for her last story. The editor praised her series, mentioning that subscriptions had increased since Hearts of the West began running. Women wrote to the paper, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph, creating a conversation that stretched across the territory. The visitors proved to be a surprise, a well-dressed couple in a fine carriage, looking distinctly out of place against the ranch's working backdrop. Eliza recognized the woman, first Harriet Blackwell, Royce's widow, accompanied by a distinguished gentleman she didn't know. Mrs. Briggs. Harriet descended from the carriage with practiced grace. I hope you'll forgive the unexpected visit. This is Mr. Theodore Whitman, my attorney. We've come with a proposition. Eliza's guard went up instinctively, but Harriet's expression held no threat, only something that looked like hope. Perhaps we should speak inside, Eliza suggested, curious despite herself. In the parlor, with coffee served in the good china, Harriet came directly to the point. I've been following your stories in the newspaper, your work with education, with helping women find new starts. I want to contribute to that work. I don't understand. My late husband left considerable debt, but also hidden assets. As his widow, I've recovered what I could. I want to use that money, tainted as it is, for something good. She pulled out a bank draft that made Eliza's eyes widen. Enough to build a proper school building, to pay teachers, to provide books and supplies for children who can't afford them. Mrs. Blackwell. Please, let me finish. The older woman's composure cracked slightly. I spent years knowing what Royce was doing and staying silent. I told myself I had no choice, that a wife must support her husband. But I was a coward. You weren't. You fought back, exposed him, showed other women they could speak up too. She straightened. I can't undo my silence, but I can support your work. Will you let me? Eliza looked at the bank draft, enough money to transform the school from a converted barn to a real institution, enough to ensure no child in Snow Ridge would go without education for lack of funds. On one condition, she said finally. The school won't bear the Blackwell name. It should honor someone who represents what we're trying to build. What name would you suggest? Eliza thought of cold nights and desperate choices, of dignity maintained against all odds. The Monroe School, for my mother, who taught me that knowledge was the one thing no one could take away. Harriet's smile was tremulous, but real. Perfect. After the Blackwells left, with promises to return for the school's dedication, Eliza found Calder in the barn. He was working with a young horse, patient movements teaching trust. Big donation, he asked, having seen the carriage. Enough to build a real school, to make a lasting difference. She told him about Harriet's visit, her offer of redemption through education. Good can come from bad, he mused, like flowers growing in ash after a fire. Speaking of growth, she took his hand, placed it on her belly where the baby was doing acrobatics. Your child is restless today. His face softened as it always did when he felt the movement, strong already, like the mother. Calder, I've been thinking about the future, with the baby coming, the school growing. My writing taking off, things are changing so fast. Change isn't always bad. Look how far we've come from that December night. That's what I mean. We've built something here, not just a life, but a community, a place where women like Sarah can start over, where children can learn regardless of their parents' means, where stories get told that need telling. She leaned against him. I want to write it down. All of it. Not just the stories I send to the newspaper, but our story. For the baby. For the children who'll come after. Then write it, though, he smiled. Maybe wait until after this one's born. You'll have your hands full soon enough. The weeks that followed blurred together in a whirl of preparation. The Monroe School's construction began, funded by Harriet Blackwell's donation and supplemented by community effort. The building rose beside the old Campbell barn, 2 stories of proper classrooms with large windows for light, and a bell tower that would call children to learning. Catherine Harper worked alongside Eliza to plan curriculum that would serve both young children and adults who'd never had the chance to learn. Walter had become their prize student, his reading improving so rapidly that he'd taken to carrying books in his saddlebags, sneaking reads during cattle drives. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sam laughed, catching Walter with a primer during lunch break. "Our toughest hand gone soft over books. Nothing soft about knowing things." Walter shot back. "Man who can read can't be cheated on contracts or fooled by fancy talk. Should have learned years ago." The first snow was falling when Eliza's pains began. Calder sent for Mrs. Baker, who delivered half the babies in the county, while Sarah boiled water and prepared clean linens. The labor was long but uncomplicated, Eliza drawing on the same deep strength that had carried her through worse trials. When the baby finally arrived, a daughter with dark hair and her father's blue eyes, the sun was just breaking over the mountains, painting the snow-covered world in shades of rose and gold. "She's perfect," Calder whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that could break horses and build furniture, but now trembled with gentleness. "What shall we call her?" Eliza asked, exhausted but euphoric. "Hope," he said without hesitation, "because that's what she represents. Hope for the future, hope for all the good that's yet to come. Hope Elizabeth Briggs entered a world already prepared to nurture her." The ranch hands tiptoed around the house, speaking in whispers. The school children made cards with careful letters. The women of Snow Ridge arrived with food and advice and hand-sewn baby clothes. As Eliza recovered, she found herself returning to her writing room, baby Hope sleeping in a cradle Calder had built nearby. The story she'd started months ago, her own story, seemed to demand completion. She wrote about the girl who'd fled Kansas with nothing but fear and determination, about the woman who'd stood in bitter cold, choosing uncertainty over compromise, about finding not just shelter but purpose, not just safety but love. She wrote about the ranch that became a haven, the community that became family, the future that bloomed from what seemed like ending. "When I stepped onto that wagon with Calder Briggs," she wrote, "I thought I was trading my last shred of dignity for basic survival. I thought the ring I'd sold for bread was the last valuable thing I possessed. How wrong I was. What I traded was a life of fear for one of possibility. What I gained was worth more than any ring, a partner who saw my strength when I could only see my desperation, work that fed my soul as well as my body, and the chance to build something larger than my own survival. To any woman reading this who stands where I once stood, cold, alone, with impossible choices before you know this, your story isn't over. The chapter you're in may be dark, but there are pages yet unwritten. Hold fast to who you are. Refuse to trade away your essential self. And trust that somewhere, somehow, there's a place where you can plant new roots." I came to Three Pines Ranch believing I was at the end of everything. Instead, I found it was just the beginning. She set down her pen as hope stirred, making the soft sounds that preceded hungry cries. Lifting her daughter, Eliza moved to the window. Outside, the ranch spread before them, the home Calder had opened to her, now truly theirs together. In the distance, the Monroe School stood proud against the winter sky, its bell ready to ring in new possibilities for all who entered. "See that little one," she whispered to Hope. "That's your world, full of people who'll teach you, protect you, show you what's possible when we lift each other up." Calder entered quietly, wrapping his arms around both of them. "How are my girls?" "Perfect," Eliza said, meaning it completely. "Absolutely perfect." As the baby nursed and Calder held them both, Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here. Every loss had led to greater gain. Every moment of despair had been transformed into strength. The woman who'd once traded her mother's ring for bread had received so much more in return. A wedding ring that symbolized true partnership, a home built on mutual respect, a community that exemplified the best of human nature, and now a child who would inherit all they'd built together. The girl who'd thought she had nothing left to lose had discovered the truth. When you hold fast to your dignity and dare to hope for better, sometimes the universe conspires to prove that better isn't just possible, it's waiting for you to claim it. In the warm circle of her family's embrace, with snow falling soft outside and the future stretching bright before them, Eliza Briggs closed her eyes and gave thanks for the cold December night that had started it all. Every difficult step had been worth it to arrive at this moment whole, loved, and home at last. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, hope, and new beginnings in the Wild West. Where are you listening from today? Please comment below and let's connect across the miles. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Eliza's journey. What part of her story touched you most? We'd love to hear from you.